What's up guys, this is Jan for Chess24. In this video we will take a look at the game of the day from round number 3 of the Tata Steel Masters, the first super tournament of the year 2018. And many people probably thought that the game of the day of this round would be an encounter between certain Magnus Carlsen and the Chinese young superstar Wei Yi, but that turned out to be not the most exciting game in the world. However, another game was fairly exciting, and that was the encounter between Vishy Anand and Fabiano Caruana. Vishy Anand has been rolling recently, won the World Rapid Championship, and also started doing very well in this tournament, won his first round game, then made a draw. Well, Caruana, the world number 2 going into this event, started more quietly with 2 draws. One of those with black against Magnus Carlsen, so not a disaster either. Without further ado, let's have a look at what happened in this game. Vishy goes for 1e4. This has been his main weapon through all these years. And Caruana replies with a line that he started adding to his repertoire. Like 1.5 years ago, maybe, he slightly changed his openings against both e4 and d4. Against d4, he started playing the Queen's Gambit accepted, and against e4, he did some serious work on the good old Petrov, and that's what he goes for in this game. The Petrov had its peak of popularity when Vladimir Kramnik was using it like 10-15 years ago to discourage people from going 1e4. Then fell out of fashion, but now it does seem to be back with a lot of Chinese top players employing it, and Fabiano Caruana, Anish Giri also occasionally there. Petrov back on the scene. And what's more fun than talking about a bit of Petrov theory, as we will do. Oh, the next couple moves. Knight takes e5, d6, knight takes f3, knight takes e4. So far so good. The reason the Petrov sort of disappeared from the arena was the move knight to c3, which seemed very tough to play in practice for black, but after years of facing it, it looks like the black players more or less figured out how to solve most of their problems here. Even though knight c3 remains a main line, we've seen it in this very tournament. Anish Giri used it to defeat Hou Yifan with the white pieces. But the fashion has slightly changed back towards the main move, 5d4. Magnus Carlsen tried his hand on playing queen e2 against Caruana earlier, but that is not really Anand's style. He goes for a theoretical debate, starting with the move d4. Black goes d5, and now white will try to prove that the black knight, which looks active on e4, is actually slightly, well, not misplaced, but exposed towards being attacked with bishop d3, c4, and a well-timed rook e1, knight c3, queen to c2. So he will try to undermine that guy, and that's a big part of the upcoming struggle. Bishop to d3. Black has like 5 sensible moves here that have all been played in practice. Bishop e7, knight c6, bishop f5, knight to d6, and the move championed by Fabiano Caruana, the move bishop to d6. In many ways, the most active looking move. The bishop occupies good diagonal. One drawback is that the queen can't keep an eye on the d5 pawn with the bishop here. Castles, c4, all of this. Mainline theory, c6. Gotta keep this pawn covered, and now white is at a crossroads. The players already played this position against each other fairly recently, I believe, St. Louis 2017, like half a year ago, and there Anand played one of the main moves, knight to c3. The game ended peacefully after. How does this go? Takes, bishop f5, rook e1, knight d7, bishop g5, queen a5, and so on and so forth. Caruana's defenses held. This time around, Anand has prepared a different line, a move that also used to be very topical a couple of years ago. The move queen to c2. Sort of threatening to take on e4, but not really. But introducing that idea, which black has to take into account. And he does so indirectly for starters. He goes for the move knight to a6, telling white, okay, you can take, but we both know you won't be all that happy. Because here, after rook to e8, black gains a lot of counterplay. Let's say queen c2, knight b4, queen somewhere, bishop to f5, and that is not a pawn you want to be taking that early in the game. Black would be doing excellently. Instead, after knight a6, which is of course still very established theory, white should and does play the move a3, just stopping black from going knight to b4, and sort of reintroducing the idea of going bishop takes e4, now that there's no knight jumps available. Black has a choice. The one move that is not played in this game, but that is fairly logical, is the move f5, going for some stonewall sort of structure, keeping this knight and planning, well, keeping this knight firmly defended on e4 and planning to maybe in the future build a kingside attack behind it. Leads to a very double-edged play. It would have been interesting to see after knight c3, knight c7, let's say rook e1. The computer is quite happy for white, but after king h8, I believe black's counterplay should not be underestimated either. So it would have been interesting to see what Vichy had up his sleeve here. Caruana, however, plays an even more direct move, the move bishop to g4. Once again saying, I don't really think you want to take on e4. This time the reason is different. After takes, black goes bishop f3, gf very weakening of course. Therefore, queen takes f3 looks logical. But now black has little double attack to regain his pawn. Queen h4. And black is doing absolutely fine. Of course, all of this is well known to both these players. They aren't really thinking at this stage yet. Many games have been played in this position, and almost all of them feature the move knight to e5. Quite logical as well. Avoiding bishop takes f3, attacking this guy and asking black, do you really want to take on e5? Give me that good bishop. In this game, the answer is no, but for that, we need to do a little history lesson, a little more Petrov theory, and explain why bishop e5 fell out of fashion. The reason is a very concrete, sharp forced line. It goes like this: d5, knight ac5, f3, knight takes d3, queen takes d3, knight c5, attacking the queen. It goes here, black goes d4. So queen d4. Looks like black is losing material, both these guys hanging, but we're only just beginning. Knight to b3, queen takes g4, knight takes a1. Now black is an exchange up, but white develops with tempo by going bishop h6, threats checkmate, only move g6. And here, once again, when I was looking at this, I don't know what year it was, like 2008 maybe, there was some game, Yakovenko-Kramnik, that reached this position. Yep, we're not inventing this. I believe the trend started turning a bit and computers started spitting out that after knight c3, white might actually have good attacking chances. I believe people started deciding that this was not a great line for black to play. Of course, you can analyze this stuff a lot further if you feel like, as far as I know, this is dangerous. Dangerous for black. So that might explain that little 20-move X-course. Why Caruana does not go for bishop e5. Instead, he goes for the move bishop back to f5, introducing a lot of tension on this diagonal. At every juncture, we, and of course the players, have to ask themselves, why not f3? Doesn't f3 win a piece? This knight can't go anywhere. This time around, the answer is no, f3 doesn't work because of bishop takes e5. d4 is hanging with check, so d takes e5, and queen b6 check. Important little resource. Pawn is king h1, knight f2 check. After rook takes f2, bishop takes d3. It is black who's winning, since queen takes d3, runs into queen takes f2. So f3 would be a bit of a mistake here. Vichy Anand instead plays a move that prepares this f3. He plays b4. Now, in all these lines which we're just talking about, queen b6 check could be met with c5, defended by a pawn on b4. Therefore, Caruana has to think of a new strategy, how to meet f3. And for now he's saying, I worry about nothing. You do your f3 and we'll take it from there. He goes for the move knight to c7. And once again, the question is, why not f3? This time, the move is being played, and black needs to explain to us why he's not losing a piece. The answer is far from obvious, and I'm guessing, I don't know this, that both players, or at least Fabiano, is still in his homework here, and he knows the way to avoid losing a piece is the move bishop back to g6. Very deep. The bishop goes out of the way so that now black could retreat his knight on the next move if he so chooses. But of course we have to figure out why white can't take the piece. Let's start with f takes e4. Then black goes bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and d takes e4. That's his point. He's trying to wrestle his way towards the d4 square for his queen. Bishop e4, queen d4. Not a great idea, since the bishop would hang. Bishop e2 is more testing, but this line also works for black, move by move. Queen d4 check, king h1, queen takes a1. Black is material up, but this queen is sort of in the corner. Doesn't matter though. Bishop b2, queen a2, knight c3. Looks like the queen is trapped, but there is one last little trick. The move e4 to e3, counter-attacking against the white queen. It's black that's winning because after queen c1, queen b3, this queen cannot be caught. So a lot of tactics to justify black's play, but it does work. Another question, even trickier, is why can't white take on g6 first, avoiding this bishop takes e5, and then grab the piece? Once again, the tactics do seem to work for black. Barely, but they do seem to work. F takes g6, freeing the view for this rook. Now queen h4 is looming, so white should take, and black just recaptures. D takes e4. And move by move, everything seems to work. Bishop e4, no good because of bishop h2, followed by rook takes f1. Black is better. Rook takes f8. The point is bishop takes f8 with sort of a double attack. E takes d3 and queen takes d4. Not easy to parry both, or impossible to parry both. So once again, black is okay. What else could we do? Bishop e2 looks like a move, but then queen h4 once again develops a nasty initiative. Black is in the driver's seat. So the tactics do work, and of course Vichy figures all that out, or knows all that. And he goes for a more positional approach. He goes for the move c5, asking this bishop to reveal its intentions. The bishop doesn't really have much of a choice. After bishop e7, this time around, white could take here. Takes and takes. With a winning position, d takes e4 would be met with a check on c4. White just emerges a piece up. So bishop e7, not really an option. The bishop has to take on e5, and after d takes e5, material is equal, but the structure has changed. The white pawn is now on e5, and as is often the case, of course this position is quite particular, but as often the case when white has this 4 against 3 on the king side, one big question is, can black do something about the white pawn steamroller with f4 and f5? For starters, he has to get his knight out of the way. Knight g5, the only available square. And interestingly, Anand plays a very quiet move here, plays the move bishop to b2. After f4, my guess is that both players thought after takes, followed by knight e4, black is sort of okay, a5 is looming, maybe we can close the position with f5. And it does not seem like white develops an initiative very easily. Therefore bishop b2, still keeping his options open when to push the pawn to f4. Maybe in some lines Anand thought it beneficial to go knight d2, first control the e4 square, and then go for f4. And this is a position where Caruana goes for a very, very committal move that, slight spoiler alert, does not find a lot of love in the engine camp. The computer does not like black's next move, the move d5 to d4. This really spices up the game even further. The point is to free the d5 square for the knight, so he wants to bring his knight to d5 and then e3 or f4 ASAP. But of course d4 also has drawbacks. One of those being that the e4 square is no longer available for the black knight after f4, which is the game continuation. Before we check out what happens in the game, let's look at the alternative that the computers do recommend. They want to take here or start with a5, comes down to the same thing. And now go a5, trying to keep white busy on the queen side, at least a little bit, before he can organize his pawn steamroller here. And the computers at least say that black is sort of alright. For example, f4, knight to e4. If f5, then white is always slightly overextending. And here, something like this, takes, queen to g5. Looks like black should be fine. This knight has a good square. And the attack seems, to run out of steam quite quickly. So I'm not sure what Anand would have played. I can imagine that knight d2 was his intention in this position as well, instead of forcing the issue with f4, giving up this square. And after knight d2, let's say, takes, knight g e6. The position is very unclear, but it does seem like black's defenses hold. After f4, even a move like g6, or let's say takes and then g6 maybe. Looks a little clumsy, but after f5, g f5, black is active enough and this knight is strong enough that the white attack does not really seem to be breaking through. So very complicated position. Of course, f5 is not forced at all either. Probably a mistake actually. But just to show how computers were trying to defend this, might be very relevant theoretically. Instead, Caruana goes for the complications that ensue after d4, playing to throw his knight towards the e3 square. And now it becomes very move by movie. f4, black doesn't have time to go knight e6 because of f5. Bishop d3, queen d3, knight e6 is not much better. f5, let's say knight g5 and h4 traps the knight. So there's no time for retreating. Instead, black has to counterattack, and that is what he does. Of course, Caruana did not miss this move, f4. He was relying on this, but it's a sacrifice. After f takes g5, knight e3, black does win some material back, but he will end up with a rook versus two pieces. Typically, in the middle game, that's not supposed to be quite enough. Queen to d2, bishop takes d3. That's better than knight f1 immediately, because here after bishop f1, queen defends this pawn, and black is just much worse. So you have to take here first. Queen takes d3, knight takes f1, king takes f1, queen g5. Now the dust is kind of settling after the very strong move, knight to d2. Only white can be better. Black will at best have a rook and a pawn for the two minor pieces. That's not enough. It can be enough under certain circumstances in the endgame, or if the rooks become very, very active. But here in the middle game with the white king, not that insecure. Only white can be better. After queen takes e5, Anand plays the safest move, knight to f3, just defending h2 and then intending to grab the d4 pawn later. Compy also says you could play more aggressively, go knight to c4, give up the h2 pawn. After queen d4, f6, establish the kraken on the d6 square. This is a super powerful knight, stopping the black rooks to become active on the e file, while keeping an eye on the b7 pawn. The computer says white is seriously better here. So that option was available, but the way Vish plays is knight f3. I believe most humans would do that, not giving up the h2 pawn. Queen h5, queen takes d4. Clarifies the situation. f6. Now we have the scenario. Black has a rook and a pawn. Has decent squares for his rooks, but only white can be better. He has to shuffle his minor pieces around, find a better square, for ideally both of them to develop an initiative. And Anand comes up with a nice little regrouping. He goes queen c4, check, king h8. And the cute move, bishop to c1, going for the d6 square, which would be a great square. Not just for the knight, but also for the bishop. If black tries to stop that with g5, he would now weaken the long diagonal. After bishop b2, probably wouldn't be all that happy about it either. Therefore, Caruana does the best thing he can do. He occupies the open file with his rook, rook e8, bishop f4, and tries to gain some space for his other rook by playing a5. These positions still not easy to play, especially against someone as resourceful as Fabiano Caruana. Here she goes bishop d6, anchoring his bishop here, and Caruana takes on b4. Which looks logical. At this point, white can't recapture with the b pawn, keeping a structure. But AB does have the drawback that after queen b4, this b7 pawn becomes very, very weak. Instead, it was an option to go for rook to e3, maybe introducing ideas like rook takes f3, but also maybe to just double rooks here and try to generate a bit of an initiative on the king side. When white remains better, but a lot of work to prove that this advantage is decisive. I'm not sure with best play. It's very possible that black can still hold such a position. After a b4, queen b4, this is a headache. Caruana certainly was not intending to switch to passive defense here with queen f7. Sooner or later, white would, well, take all the time in the world, but would target this b7 pawn. And if black can't go active here, his task is very, very grim. Instead, Caruana says, okay, you take b7, I will activate my pieces to the max and try to create a mating attack, or at least potential perpetual, starting with queen d5. Vishy, however, not easy to bluff. Vishy sees a pawn that can be grabbed and sees no refutation. He will go for it, and here he does play the move queen takes b7, asking Caruana to show him the money. And it turns out that the black initiative doesn't really develop much further. Queen d3 looks logical, king g1, rook takes a3, but white is in time to take, queen takes a3. And here the key move h3, we'll also see later in the game. This king is tremendously safe on this diagonal because his bishop does cover all the squares where black could give a check. Therefore, after h3, king h2, white should probably be winning long run because the pawn on c6 remains very, very weak. Instead, Caruana continues the policy to not try to regain material quickly or keep material. Goes h6, giving his own king a little luft on h7. And Anand does take a bit of a timeout to regroup his king towards its perfect square again. King g2, rook a4, trying to enter the game from here or here. h3. Rook c4. Of course, a rook on c2 would change the game completely if these rooks all of a sudden end up here. White would be in trouble. But Vishy has anticipated that he can cover the second rank. He does so with queen b2. Looks passive, but it's really about not allowing black to activate. White doesn't need his pieces in active positions right now because he's winning by head count. And he does have the fairly simple plan to push Anton all the way to a8. So queen b2, queen d3, renewing the threats. Rook to a2, pairing them once again. And black is running out of ideas. Caruana goes for the last line of counterplay. Well, I'm trying to give a check here, but that check on h1 is not such a big threat. The white king is fairly safe on the g3 square as well. Anand recognizes that and quietly plays a4. Running f5. Maybe hoping to create some mating nets with f4. But also exposing his own king, because now the e5 square is no longer controlled. And Vishy plays a remarkable move in some sort of time travel. At least I'm not sure it would have crossed my mind. He goes queen b7, understanding that the queen is no longer needed to defend the second rank and can now switch back to attack. Keeping an eye on g7, so bishop e5 is looming. Queen takes c6 is looming. Queen f7. Long story short, very, very strong move. And the black defenses can no longer be upheld. Caruana tries f4, threatening checkmate in one. But of course, bishop takes f4 is played. Rook takes c5. This pawn falls and c6 is defended. But the a pawn remains alive, so you would have expected, or I would have expected, this pawn to run, which seems to be good enough. But Anand remarkably decides, correctly as well, that this pawn is no longer needed either. All that's needed is activate the pieces. And he is happy to give up this pawn to now switch to a mating attack. Very interesting. Transformation of advantages. Rook d2, queen takes a4, and queen f7, that's his point. And all of a sudden, all the white pieces will jump into action right away. And there's nothing black can do. He's not coordinated enough. Materially speaking, this is the best black has been doing for a while. But now the white attack will get the job done. Rook g8, keeping an eye on g7. White already has a couple options, and it's also pleasant that here he has made it past the time controller move 40. This is move 41. So you can take some time to calculate everything. One way to play it would have been bishop takes h6. This was working well because gh, white can give a series of checks that eventually would lead to checkmate. goes something like this. Of course, black was forced to take on h6, but the alternatives don't look very appealing either. However, Anand goes for a move that is aiming for control without sacrifices, just improves the position of this bishop, bishop e5, keeping an eye on g7, and also introducing ideas that maybe taking on h6 would not be a pleasant sight for black. Caruana tries to exchange the queens here with queen to c4, because now that he has pawn and a rook for the two pieces, an endgame would probably be tenable. But Anand does not do him the favor of exchanging queens. Instead, the next move is the last move of the game. If you guys want to spot it, I will breathe in, breathe out, and give you a chance to figure it out. It is a move that drew the attention of none other than the world champion Magnus Carlsen. It's a little queen sacrifice. The move rook to d6, threatening a check on h6, and forcing instant resignation, because queen f7, rook h6 check is not just a check, but checkmate. And in order to parry that, you would have to play a move like king h7, after which queen g6, king h8, queen h6 does end the game. Magnus Carlsen noticed this move and the whole game and was full of compliments for Vishy Anand, tweeting rook d6 check, double exclam, Vishy64 the king, hashtag still got it. Vishy Anand indeed still got it, winning the World Rapid Championship recently and now jumping into, into the lead in the Tata Steel Chess 2018, where he catches Anish Giri, who was the sole leader before this round. Then Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, only half a point behind. Dwayne Jones, starting with 2 out of 3, not a bad start for the lowest rated player in the field. Well, Fabiano Caruana will not be too happy with his -1. The good news is there's 13 rounds to play, so plenty of chess yet to be played. But boy, does Vishy Anand seem to be in form. It's going to be an exciting tournament. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next highlight video.